Jason Nicol to the stage to present on aquatic vegetation in the lower lakes.
So yeah, you've got to tolerate aquatic vegetation for the next 15 minutes. Not a lot harder to sell than thukabi and threatened fish. I just want to start by indulging myself a little bit here and talk about the TLM from my perspective. And as it turns out, I mean, Adrian and Scotty have also done that too. So I'm feeling like I'm not out of place here. But you know, at the time, TLM, it was the largest river restoration undertaken in Australia, and I was really in the right place at the right time. It was 2004, I was just finishing up my PhD. I had a pregnant partner, so she was really cracking the whip to make me finish. And, and I recall, I know people here, I mean, if you're up at the celebration up at Mildura, you know, Professor Gary Jones was up there. Now, Gary, I was a CRC for freshwater ecology student, and I knew Gary from my time there. And Gary came and gave a talk in Adelaide at the Wine Centre and got up and proclaimed, it is an exciting time to be a freshwater ecologist in Australia. And he was right in some respects. You know, it was an exciting time. You know, at the the time this was, you know, it was the largest river restoration project in Australia. I mean, it's largely been overtaken by Basin Plan now, but the idea was to, you know, recover 500 gigalitres of water. Now that's not, it seems like a lot, but it's not a huge amount of water in the scheme of the Murray-Darling Basin. And the idea was to, you know, get that 500 gigalitres and put it in, you know, on relatively small parts of the Murray-Darling, monitor it, show there's a result, and then use that to, you know, gain some social license to actually say, well, a small amount of water is doing good at small places. So if we get a larger amount of water, then we're going to get that, you know, we'll hopefully get that basin-wide. And, you know, I'm tonight going to be talking about Objective V3, right down the bottom there. Now, the Objective V3 is to maintain or improve aquatic and littoral vegetation in the lower lakes. Now, that's a fairly ambiguous target. It's not, you know, it's not particularly quantitative. So we had a review of TLM monitoring, I think it was probably about 10 or 12 years ago. And, you know, that objective now has become 42 separate targets. Now, I'm not going to go through all 42 of those targets because, A, it would bore the crap out of you all. And, you know, you don't want to see, I don't have time to run through 42 graphs in 15 minutes. So I'm going to summarise things. But however, I was able to summarise those 42 targets into a whole of icon site condition score, which I'll talk about a bit later. I'm not going to dwell on this slide for too long. We're all from, you know, we're all very familiar with the site. The monitoring sites are the triangles. And the following slide, I've got a plot of the water levels since August 2008 when this project began, and which was during the millennium drought. You know, flows were insufficient to you know, keep, you know, water levels in the lower lakes above sea level. You know, I mean, we sort of look out to Goolwa Channel now. You know, if we were here, you know, 15 years ago, we'd be looking at a very different thing, and, you know, people would have a very, very good memory of that. It was a pretty distressing time for everybody. It's something that, you know, I really, really hope that we never see again. It was, you know, and I can speak for everybody here. It was just depressing. You know, I love what I do. I really enjoy working with aquatic plants, and, you know, just coming down here, it really, you know, it affected me. It was just like, oh, I've got to do TLM monitoring. It's like, oh, you know, for lower lakes. It was, you know, when the drought broke, it was really quite a very good thing. Now, for reporting the MDBA, the lakes are divided into 5 habitats. I've probably got a laser pointer here. Is that? You know, there we go. We've got Lake Alexandrina, Lake Albert, Goolwa Channel, which is the bit between the Clayton Regulator and Goolwa Barrage, and includes the Lower Finnis and Lower Currency Creek. And we also have some wetlands, so permanent wetlands, ones that are continuously hooked up to the lakes and are permanently inundated, and some temporary wetlands, ones that disconnect from the lake seasonally and dry, usually in the summer or autumn. So here's the hydrograph, and as I mentioned in the previous slide, metres AHD, Australian height datum, equivalent to metres above sea level basically. Now, if it's sort of thinking back, and Adrian did talk about some of those interventions, we had the Narung Bund, Clayton regulator, which raised water levels in here. Then we had reconnection. Then we had some lake level cycling. Now, lake level cycling was to draw more salty water out of Lake Albert and flush out of the barrages. Then, once we started to get more environmental water to be able to underwrite refilling of the lakes, we started to have these autumn drawdowns. Now, Scotty showed you they weren't great for fish. I'm going to show you they were really good for veg. So there's some. I don't envy Adrian or the water managers' jobs because trading off veg for fish is not something I'm glad that I don't have to make the decision for. There's just some photos to thinking back what things were like during the Millennium Drought. This is one of my sites off at Tolderol Point near Langhorne Creek. Spring 2008, can't even see the water. Looked like a big, sort of beach basically, and the tide had gone out in a very long way. Now, spring 2009, they'd done some planting, stabilised the sediment, and also to provide some, some organic matter for acid sulphate soil remediation. Then spring 2010, water levels reinstated, and I threw this photo in autumn 2020. Now, this is the result of some lake level cycling that was done. Now, the interesting thing is these feathery plants here, that's a plant called Myriophyllum muelleri. Now, they had not been recorded in the lower lakes since some work that was done by some colleagues of mine back in 1989. And that was the last time that plant was seen in the lower lakes. And it's, it's been, I've been seeing it most years in autumn when water levels have dropped in at Tolderol Point. So that's one of the good things that has come out from the Living Murray is we've been able to see a species that was lost from the lakes, what we thought, and it's been able to come back. Not going to dwell on methods for too long. We do surveys every spring and autumn usually. Quadrat's placed at different elevations along the lakes, basically from the high water mark or close to it, down to 1/2 metre below sea level. We use we estimate percent cover and scale that, and we look at the change through time using some NMDS ordinations. And I'm not going to, don't worry, it's not going to be too stats heavy. I quite like MDS ordinations, and I had a really good explanation of ordination. Now, ordinations are what scientists show members of the public to completely and utterly confuse them. But what an ordination is, and I'm just going to really quickly explain this, is in maths world, you can have more than 3 dimensions. And what ordinations do is they take that data that's in more than 3 dimensions, squash it down into 2 or 3 dimensions which our brains can actually comprehend, and hence we get that. All you've got to know with this is that the points that are a long way away from each other are very different from each other. The ones that are close together are really similar. So it's pretty simple. And you don't need to understand the maths behind it to actually look at this and understand it. It's all quite simple. But this slide compares the vegetation. I've pulled all the elevations from Goolwa Channel. So basically the water body right behind you and Currency and Finnis. And so these animations work. So spring 2008 and autumn 2009, low water levels, terrestrial species or bare soil, pretty grim. Then we had the Clayton regulator. Raised water levels in here, got a bit salty. And if you remember, there was just this massive recruitment event of Potamogeton pectinatus. It's a native submergent plant, really, really good at fouling props. So I had a project to map the extent of it. And it's Aaron Strawbridge, tech I was working with at the time. We spent a lot of time getting that off of the prop. It was very slow going. Then there was reconnection. We had the drought broke. There was reconnection with Lake Alexandrina. Then we started to get an increase in submergent plants that other than Potamogeton pectinatus. Potamogeton pectinatus was still around a little bit, but we started to get your ribbonweed, your vallisneria, milfoil, myriophyllum. and other species like that started to reappear that were lost during the drought. Then we had some lake level cycling for Lake Albert. Then, there was a fair bit of time there where the vegetation didn't change very much. It was, fairly stable, and now we're sort of getting a little bit more variability with the managed autumn drawdowns. This is another ordination. However, this is from the temporary wetlands. So these are the wetlands that sort of right on the fringes of the lakes. They fill up when the lake levels are high. They disconnect and they dry out during spring. A completely natural thing. Now these are floristically, because they have a different water regime. They're very, very different from the permanent wetlands and the habitats that are connected to the lakes all the time. And so here, whilst water levels were low, now there were, with the exception of Narung, there were very few interventions done. Adrian showed the photo of the Narung wetland being pumped, but there was no seasonal inundation because lake levels were too low. Some of the lakes, or some of the wetlands, filled up a little bit with some local rainfall, but normally they were, instead of being seasonally inundated, they were pretty much dry 100% of the time. Then we had reconnection. They were quite slow to respond. When things reconnected, there was a lot of just open water, no vegetation. Then we started to get these seasonal inundation patterns. So we've got the spring, wetlands full of water, usually got submergent veg in it and a few other species. Then in autumn, the dry, submergent veg is gone. It's down. It's in the seed bank. It's still persisting. However, you don't pick it up in your vegetation surveys. And you also start to see an increase in amphibious species. Now, amphibious species, they're the species that are adapted to wetting and drying. They have a requirement or a preference to be in situations where they wet and dry. We've been seeing a steady increase through the condition monitoring program of these species in these temporary wetlands. I mentioned earlier the condition score. Now that summarises the target. So this is basically the summary of the 42 targets. I mean, if you read my report, there are 42 separate graphs that show the attainment and how these targets track through time. But this is all those targets combined for a condition score of the lower lakes. I'm more than happy to discuss it if people want to discuss how I've actually come up with this. However, see, water levels were low, condition score was low. Reconnection, and sort of sat between fair and good condition. Then from about, I need my notes here, it was from about 2018 or 19, we started to see a real sort of sustained and steady sort of upward trend of the condition score. So I'd like to think that we might be doing something right here. We did start from a pretty low baseline here so one would hope that returning water to the lakes has seen an improvement in condition. I mean, one of the frustrating things we have when we're designing these programs is that there's no baseline data. We have very little data pre 2008. There've been a few surveys done here and there, but not continuous, regularly, consistently collected data like TLM's been able to provide. Kerry Muller, who wrote the Ramsar TLM, or sorry, not the TLM, the Ramsar ECD. I'm getting my acronyms or initials confused here. That was a one-off thing. It was a great piece of work, but it was a snapshot that was done nearly 20 years after listing. So there's been things done like that. Now TLM has provided this really good mid-term data set that's been able to show how things have changed through time. And it's unfortunately, it would have been great to have had that data set from about 1985 to sort of have a proper baseline. I mean, this was all done by expert opinion. As a Tim Doga, a colleague, likes to call it the bogs rat assessment, which is a bunch of girls/guys sitting around the table, or as we like to call it, MSU, making stuff up. Finally, I'd just like to thank some people, the NWBA for funding this. Adrian, Kirsty and Luke, they've been really good project managers, really good to work with. Again, as Scotty mentioned, landholders, you know, a lot of the lake is private property. Landholders have been very, very generous in granting me access, and you know, they've been very hospitable. They've cooked stuff a lot of the time. You know, I've probably put on about 10 kilos since I started this, but it's a courtesy of the landholders feeding me. And also want to thank the mob at Rauken. I've got some sites at Rauken. They've also been very generous. They've you know, opened up and said, you know, I felt really welcome there, and really, really enjoyed working with them. So, thank you.